Okay, well, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. This is the Partner Decision Support Briefing, 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, September 12th. A few things have changed since earlier this morning due to us now starting to get in that 24 to 36 hour time frame where we're going to start seeing impacts from the rain and wind. We have now taken the Cumberland, Sampson, and Wayne counties who were under a hurricane watch earlier. They are now under a tropical storm warning. And we've also expanded the tropical storm watch area to now include Lee, Moore, and Richmond counties. Not a lot has changed on the greatest impacts expected. We still expect to see areas to the east and southeast of the triangle to be the hardest hit from the heavy rainfall, flash flooding, and winds. So when we look at this graphic, the extreme flooding and that's expected is going to be mainly over the sandhills and coastal plain. As you get more inland, getting into the triangle, we do expect those impacts to start to decrease, but could still be fairly significant and elevated. And then as you get into the Northwest Piedmont, the Triad, we're expecting fairly limited impacts from both flooding and wind. But let me repeat, the Sandhills, Southern Coastal Plain, we expect to see extreme inland flooding from heavy rainfall, and that's largely due to the slow movement of Florence. Not a whole lot different here as well. Again, we're expecting that things are really starting to go downhill as far as weather late tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow evening, but especially Thursday night and into Friday. And that's going to be a fairly tight gradient across the Sandhills and Southern Coastal Plain. So we're expecting to start seeing some of those initial rain bands starting to rotate inland and onshore and coming into Sampson and Wayne and Cumberland counties on Thursday afternoon. The heaviest rainfall is expected Friday night, and even lingering into Saturday. So we're talking about a 36 to 48 hour window where we're going to see moderate to heavy rainfall. It's going to come in waves. It's not going to be steady, but it's going to be coming in waves. The wind may be a little delayed behind the rain, but we're expecting the wind to really start to increase late Thursday night and into Friday, and a peak time for those looks to be Friday night and Saturday, and then starting to wind down and decrease a little Saturday evening, Saturday night. Because of the combination of the saturated soils, the very strong winds, we're expecting to have widespread and prolonged power outages. Again, a lot of that's going to be concentrated from the triangle and to the east and southeast. Here's the latest 5 p.m. advisory. Florence has weakened a little down to 120 miles an hour, but that's still a Category 3, and we expect it to be a significant and major storm as it approaches the coast. It's currently moving northwest at around 16 miles an hour, and that's about 385 miles southeast of Wilmington. Eventually, we're expecting that storm to start to slow down, start to make that westward turn somewhere around the South Carolina and North Carolina coast near the Cape Fear region. And that's where the greatest uncertainty is as it starts to decrease. And as a forecasting standpoint, when the storm just basically comes to a stall, that's one of the worst things we want to see, because then the motion can become very erratic and difficult to forecast. So there is still lots of uncertainty here with the track of the storm. We have seen a southward trend and bias in the models recently, but again, lots of uncertainty. So no one should yet let their guard down. As you can see here on those points at 2 p.m. Saturday and 2 p.m. Friday, that's 24 hours, and we're not expecting a whole lot of storm movement between that. Okay. You've seen this graphic, and you see that, hey, it's still looking at very categorical 90 to 100% probabilities of tropical storm force winds. And you'll see in some of the couple of slides some of the wind speeds. We are now from the 11:30 briefing, we realized we didn't actually have some wind speed values, so we made sure we included that, and I'll show that to you here coming up. The earliest arrival, this is the earliest. It's around as early as tomorrow morning, but again, we're expecting the most likely time is going to start seeing those late Thursday and Thursday night. The wind threat. So these extreme and high wind threats are based on the magnitude and the resultant impacts, and this has not changed a lot. We still expect Sampson County, parts of Cumberland and Wayne to experience the strongest and most destructive and damaging wind gusts, and that again we'll see a gradient, a very tight gradient across that I-95 corridor, where we'll still see some significant winds. And it should continue to taper off the further inland and further northwest that you get. But what we want everybody, to prepare, over prepare with this storm, given the magnitude, the strength, and given the slow movement of the storm. As promised, here are the two expected peak wind and wind gusts. So you can see there in Sampson County, our southern coastal plain, Cumberland, Wayne. We're expecting to see peak sustained winds somewhere in that 35 to 45, and once you get down there towards southern Sampson County, they could even get into that next level, sustained around 50 miles an hour. As you go inland towards the Triangle, we're expecting sustained winds in that 25 to 30 to 35 mile per hour range. As you continue to go up into the Triad, basically 15 to 25. Now, when you're looking at the wind gusts, you're seeing wind gusts peaking out in southern Sampson County around 70 to 72 miles an hour. Remember, 58 mile per hour winds, which is the criteria that we use to issue severe thunderstorm warnings, and so we know what type of damage 58 mile per hour winds can do. So now we're expecting wind gusts of 58 and higher in that southeastern corridor. Okay, and then all the way back up into the Triangle, we're still looking at wind gusts of 35 to 45 miles per hour, decreasing as you go further inland. Now, these wind gusts are not going to be constant, but they are going to be very frequent. And you're going to see it when we start to see those stronger, heavier rain bands. It's going to be inside those heavier rain bands. Updated rainfall totals, and not a lot's changed. They really started trying to maybe zoom in and focus that heavier rainfall near that South Carolina, North Carolina state line. But some of the strong wording they used, especially across that southeastern corner of our state, is that in that bullseye where you're seeing, and it all depends on how long the storm sits and just spins, we could see easily, and this is going to be just east of our area, but along the coast, we could see rainfall amounts of 30, 35 inches, even 40. For Sampson County and Wayne, we're getting closer to like 15 to 20 inches of rain. Would it certainly possible to have higher amounts? These are the areas that we're very concerned about. This is where we're going to likely be seeing life-threatening flooding, very reminiscent of what we had with Matthew. As you start to go back further west, getting in that I-95 corridor, we're looking at lower amounts of probably 5 to 10 inches, and we still know that we've had a very wet summer. It's been a fairly wet last couple of weeks. That will cause problems. If you live in an area that frequently floods, it's going to flood, but it's going to be a severe flood. And then as you continue to go up into the Triangle, even 4 to 6 inches, we'll have problems with urban areas. As you get in the Triad, right now we're not expecting to have many impacts from the rainfall for the Northwest Piedmont, including the Triad. Now, some of the guidance, and this, we're really not showing this right now, but some of the guidance shows that Florence could be around around somewhere in the southern central Appalachians by the early to middle part of next week. This is basically, potential that we could have a heavy rainfall coming for the triad later in the week, and that's not captured here. We got plenty of time to talk about that and to give everybody a heads up when we expect that to happen. So that's still a few days away. The hazard and threat impact from the heavy rain, again, you can see the tight gradient that we're expecting along that Sandhills and coastal plain region. We're expecting very extreme impacts, life-threatening and prolonged flooding for areas along and east of the I-95 corridor. As I mentioned earlier, that's beginning Thursday night, and for now, expect it to continue into the weekend, possibly even into early Monday. The tropical tornado threat, it is there. It's going to be so minor compared to our wind and flooding threat, but there will be the potential that we could see some weak, short-lived tornadoes possible, again, in that I-95 corridor. Okay, now I'm going to pass you along to Kathleen. She's going to talk about some of the projections for a couple of our river forecasts.
All right, for those of you who are on this morning, these graphics are the same. They have not updated since then, but the message is still the same with regards to kind of the uncertainty and the tight gradient making a big impact on what we can expect on the rivers. So you can see the different lines here correspond to different what we call ensemble members, which are just small changes in the model simulation when it runs, and it'll spit out different solutions. And so you can see the wide range here. We've got one solution that has upwards of 12 to 12.5 inches of rain being produced, and another one that produces 2 inches. And so what we try to do is give you, okay, the most likely scenario is somewhere in the middle, which is this line with the triangles and the orange shading. So that still is giving you anywhere from 5 to 8 inches most likely, and this is for the Cape Fear River down in Fayetteville. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't have as much as 12 plus inches. And what that would correspond to on the rivers is a response such as this. So you can see there are several members here that are trying to predict major flooding on the Cape Fear River at Fayetteville. But there are also several members that don't have Fayetteville even reaching minor flooding. So again, this is a indication of the degree of uncertainty and how small changes in the amount of precipitation we get and the track of Florence as that relates to it can significantly change the river flooding. We are still expecting at least minor flooding, if not major flooding, at most of the what we call our forecast points across the area, especially as we get farther to the south and east. So the Cape Fear River down in Fayetteville, the Neuse River in Goldsboro, those are two of the closer to the coast with the higher rainfall amounts expected that we could see some big problems at. And for comparison, I wanted to show, this is one of our far northwestern points. Again, a wide range. It's not really pegged down for any really certain amounts of rainfall, and so you can see anywhere from 3 to 6 inches of rain could is most likely, but there could be as much as 8 inches, as little as 2 inches. And what that would correspond to on the rivers, again, we're going to see a rise. It's just a matter of the degree of rise that we're going to see on these rivers. So even in an area where we may not be expecting quite as much precipitation, we could still see at least minor flooding on those rivers. So prepare for the worst case scenario, and in this case it's major flooding on all of the rivers, and you'll be prepared for whatever comes at you.
Okay, thanks, Kathleen. So, this is, at the end we normally have a summary slide, and I tried to prepare a graphical one. And so if I had to advise everyone of a good slide, one that they should print out show or pass along to everyone is going to probably be this one, because we tried to sum it up. So this is a graphical display of the impacts by area, you know, and we don't have it broken down. It's a combination of both wind and heavy rain. And this should be very similar to what you've heard us talk about for the last 15, 20 minutes, that we expect in that southeastern area. We expect extreme impacts of both heavy rain, flooding, and strong and damaging winds. And as you go northwest up into the Sandhills, up into the eastern Piedmont, we're still expecting high impacts. That could lead to an increased threat of life and property if people don't make sound decisions. And then as we get into the triangle and further up into the western Piedmont and up near the Virginia border, we're expecting diminishing impacts, but still moderate impacts that people need to be alert. Okay? I won't go over all these slides. I will mention that, you know, we do have a bullet there about river flooding possible on some of the, most likely on the Cape Fear, Little, Black, and Neuse rivers. Again, it's a little early to tell, but we are watching those rivers, and you know, be prepared to act, especially if you know that moderate and major flooding, what that does for your county and for your area. Okay. Confidence, you know, confidence is about the same as we had earlier. As I alluded to earlier, when the storm sits and it's moving very little and it's stalled out, it can be highly sensitive to the least little change in the upstream pattern that's going to be over us, over the Mid-Atlantic, over west of the mountains. So uncertainty is still not high on the exact track and where those really tight gradients are going to be. We know there's going to be significant and extreme impacts across the Carolinas, and we're still trying to fine-tune that. So continue to tune in. We have our next briefing will be tomorrow morning at 11:30 a.m. Okay, so now we got time for questions, and I saw early on we had one from Chris, and Chris asked, when you speak about the possibility of remnants to drop additional amounts of rain, how far east in North Carolina do you anticipate that to include? And he wants to know, do you anticipate that this impact will include higher than normal winds and or possible tornadoes? So right now, it looks like if Florence is indeed very slow and moving up the spine of the Appalachians Monday, Tuesday, possibly into Wednesday, we'll have another heavy rain potential across the western, possibly as far east as the central Piedmont, including the Triangle. But right now, it looks like it would be mostly the North Carolina mountains, foothills, and into the western Piedmont and Triad. As far as tornado potential, that's too early to tell. And as far as winds, we're not expecting it to be any wind threat at that point. Next question I'm seeing is, are you expecting that the Hall River in Chatham will surpass flood stage? If so, when? And I'm gonna let Kathleen answer that.
So yeah, based on what I just looked at, the most likely simulation puts the Hog River, and that's at Bynum, that's in Chatham County, and it would put that above minor flood stage, and it would do that sometime either late Friday or over the weekend. So granted, now if we get a lot more rain than what we're expecting, that could happen sooner, and it could rise even higher. Obviously, if we get less, then correspondingly so, we may not see it quite get there. But I would prepare for at least moderate flooding at the Haw River in Chatham County. And, you know, if it doesn't make it there, then that would be great. But you'll be prepared should it do that.
Okay. Thanks, Kathleen. From Sandy asked, when tomorrow will Johnston County see tropical storm winds? And can we get the same accumulated precip river level simulation for the Neuse? It looks like for Johnston County, we really expect winds to start to pick up late Thursday night, and strongest during the day on Friday and continuing into the day on Saturday. Now, I know that's a long time span, but you have to remember this is a very slow moving storm. And so we can expect a long duration. You're not going to see a constant wind speeds at the tropical storm force winds, but they will be frequent. And again, they will be with those rain bands. Second part of that question about the new simulation, again, I'm going to turn that over to Kathleen.
So similarly with the Neuse, and I want you all to keep in mind that the spread is still very great with these. So these are low confidence forecasts at this point, but the Neuse is also expected to get into above flood stage, and it would happen again over the weekend. The greater chances, obviously, it would be the farther towards the coast you go. So places like Goldsboro and Smithfield, lesser chances at Clayton because it is farther away from the coast. However, as the rainfall estimates change, that will change. So keep in mind that's low confidence, and changes to the forecast will impact that greatly.
Okay, thanks. And one more question. This is from Alton. When do you anticipate wind and rain in the triad? It looks like they're going to be one of the last places to see rain and the wind. It looks like, again, we're not expecting great impacts. We're expecting wind gusts 15 to 25 miles per hour and rainfall about 2 to 3 inches. That looks like most of that will occur on Friday and extending into the weekend. Okay, and then Brian asks, Florence is a Cat 3 now. Is there a significant risk it could increase back to a Category 4? So, yeah, Florence should start to move over the Gulf Stream into a deeper, warmer content water. So there is the potential for Florence to strengthen over the next 24 hours. But then again, they expect it to weaken, maybe possibly as it gets into the shallower waters closer to the coast. But right now, I wouldn't get too caught up if it's going to be a Cat 3 or Cat 4. It's going to be a major hurricane. All right. I'm not seeing any more questions. Thank you for joining today. Have a good and be safe.